Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you are here, my name is Mano, and in this video we are talking about startups versus big companies, working at startups versus big companies. And by big companies we mean companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and something like Infosys, Wipro, all the and TCS, to be honest. Like they are all top big companies, and they have offices in top locations in all over the country and multiple countries as well. And by startups we mean companies like Cred, companies like Zerodha, companies like Paytm and Dunzo maybe. So these are all company startups, and they have started like a few years ago, and they are hiring talents all over the country. And I want to give you a small formalized thingy over here, and it's quite famous in the finance world as well. And if you are someone from the finance world, I'm sure you might know this formula. And that thing is high risk is equals to high reward, and low risk is equals to low reward. This is something that comes handy and applies to most of the things in our day-to-day life. If you want to choose something, you can choose that particular thing based on this formula. And I left all the timestamps to all the parts of the video in the description below. Feel free to skip through the video, and let's start the video. So now let's talk about the skills required to get into any big companies or a startup. And if you are willing to join a big company like Infosys, TCS, or Google or Microsoft, they will mostly care about your problem solving skills 95% of the time. And because they want people who are readily available to solve problems which arise in their day-to-day life cycle. So they want someone who is like really interested in solving problems with skills they have. And they will mostly the top companies will test you based on your competitive programming skills. And if you don't know what a competitive programming is, I have already made a video about that, and you can go check that out. And I will leave them in the cards above somewhere. Also, the video is in the description below. You can go and check it out if you wish to. And so basically, you will be tested based on your programming skills, like problem solving, competitive programming skills. And they will have multiple rounds to test your skills, because you all have to face that, because every top company is quite famous, and a lot of people like us are going to apply to those companies. So obviously the competition is like really high over there, and you have to put in a lot of effort to secure a job there. On the other hand, if you are talking about startups, if you want to join a startup like Dunzo or Cred or Zomato for that matter, Zomato is not a startup right now, they are going for an IPO, but for consider Cred or Dunzo for startups, they will mostly want specialists to their startup to grow really fast, because startups are like really growing fast paced companies, and they want someone who actually has the skill and they can start working from the first day itself. So they don't have a lot of time to prepare you for what the company structure is. Like usually startups are non-structured, so you have to adapt like as fast as you can. And you will be entering as a specialist. For example, if you are a coder, or you can also be a marketing agent, you can also be a sales rep, you can also be finance guy. You have to be a specialist in that particular thing to enter a startup. But after entering a startup, your roles might change a lot, because at a startup they have a very less labor power, and they have to expand and stretch it a lot, so they can squeeze a lot from their employees and labor. So that's a thing over there. So if you are someone who is a coder, if you are hired as a front-end developer, like you are familiar with HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and if that startup is particularly needing a back-end engineer, someone who can do AWS or Firebase or MongoDB really good, and if they don't have the time or the money to hire the back-end engineer, they might ask you to take up a back-end developer job. They will give you some time to get your basics right, and they might shift you from front-end works to back-end works. So in startup, you will be entering as a specialist, and you have to switch roles multiple times. Also, the growth in a startup is like really high. You have to admit that they will provide you a really high growth, and we will discuss that in the later sections of this video. But if in a startup you will be switching a lot of roles, and in a big company that's not the case. Usually you will be at a particular role if you are provider. If you are a front-end developer, you will be mostly at a front-end developer case, and they won't ask you to change your role very often, because they have special people to do those particular roles respectively. So in startups you will be changing roles. In big companies your roles will be almost constant. Now let's talk about the learning curve in both the startups and the big companies, working in startups and versus working at big companies. And if you are someone who choose to work at a startup, as everyone says, the learning curve is really steep. It's really high, and you can't compare your learning curve, what you learn from a big company versus what you learn from a startup. Because in a startup you will be putting in a lot of information, lot of data into your brain in a short span of time, because startups want someone who can upgrade themselves in a short span of time and help that particular startup grow. So you will be learning a lot, not just what you are hired for, but also for things what you are not hired for. So you will be having to learn all those things which you could not experience in a big company. So the learning curve is like really steep. You will be like this one superman or superwoman who constantly switches their roles and tries to manage everything at the same time. So yes, the learning curve is steep in startups. And if you come back to a big company, yes, there is a learning curve. There is a really good learning curve. But comparing to that learning curve to a startup, it's not as steep as a learning curve in startup. Because if you are working at a big company, you can deliberate your work to your colleagues or your peers, and that cannot be done at a startup, because you are in control of that wheel. If startup is a machine, you are a wheel of that. If one wheel is not performing good, the whole machine will stop. And yes, you will be learning a lot from your seniors and your bosses or your colleagues, because all those kinds of people working at a big company are much more experienced than you, and you can't find those kinds of experienced minds in a startup, because these people are working at that particular company, that particular field for a long time, long before you entered this field. So you will you are more likely to learn a lot from these people. So it's a kind of fun thing to do with a big company. Alright guys, now let's talk about the salary. This could be one of the most important parameters for you guys to choose between a startup and a big company. And obviously big companies are established and they have good cash reserves to pay you a good package compared to a startup, because startups are growing, right? Like they don't have a cash reserve themselves, enough cash reserve to pay you a good package. And in a big company you will get it as a package, not just as a base cash salary. You will give you a package, and by package I mean that you will be having your taxes cut, you will be having your base cash salary. There will be a lot of things in a package depending on what company you join, and those privileges are not provided by a startup. Like yes, there are startups which provide that if the startup is like really funded and have a really good cash reserve, but usually most of 95% of the startups don't have a good cash reserve, and they bootstrap their own cash so that the startup can run really well. So they don't have like a really good cash reserve to pay a good package compared to a big company. And but there is a catch over here, there is a really big catch over here. And every company, every startup, whatever the business is, they will provide you with stocks of that particular company. For example, if you are joining Cred will provide you with their stocks, and if you are joining Google, Google will provide you with their Google stocks. And actually they are not actual stocks, they are called stock options, like they usually called as ESOPs, employee stock options plan. And this employee stock option plan plays an important role for your importance in that particular startup. So what this does is that if, like for example, let's do this. And if you are someone who is joining a big company, the big companies, for example, let's say it's Infosys or TCS. If the TCS stock price is 3,000 rupees, that 3,000 will stay constant for years. Like it's like more or less flat. And in a startup, that's not the case. If a startup is getting new funding, if the startup gets acquired by some other big company, that stock price of that startup will shoot up like crazy. It will like so exponential. Initially it will be like in paisa, it will be like in single digit money. And if the startup really gets a really good investment, really good marketing and appearance in front of the crowd, the value of that stock, value of that ESOP will increase exponentially, and that will help you generate some really good wealth in your future. So this is something you have to consider before joining a startup, before joining any job, like taking up any job in any company, and look through that, check whether the company is providing you with good ESOPs, good stock options or not. And yes, there are companies who doesn't provide stock options as well. They are like mostly companies not to join. If you choose to join those companies, it will consider to be a bad choice, and because they don't usually value their employees as much as companies who provide stock options to their employees. So work-life balance is one thing many people expect in a company which they join, in a job company which provide jobs for them. And in a startups, if you consider to join a startup, don't think of work-life balance, because startups are struggling to succeed. And if you are trying to join them and looking at a work-life balance, it's kind of a myth over there. You can't get a work-life balance right there. You will be spending a lot of time on your startup office than you spend time on with yourself. So in startups, work-life balance is like a bit here and there over there. Like it's not really good in startups, but in a big companies, yes, the work-life balance is good. It's not that great because if you are someone who is going to job, you have to manage both things perfectly. So work-life balance is good at a big company, because there are people who can take up your absence and you can chill out a bit over there. Everything is fine. End of the day, it's all about what you want for yourself, and ask questions to yourself, like whether you will like going to this particular office for your day-to-day work, whether you will like to work with these kinds of mind, these kinds of people, and enjoy your time which you spend in with them. And ask like whether the company will actually value your time and your value and your work as you do. So hopefully by the end of these questions, once you ask these questions to yourself, you will find your answer. And yeah, that's it for me, guys. So if you found this video informative, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. So see you guys next time. Bye bye.